Do you see that? That's Praxis, a moon of the Klingon homeworld. Well, it was Praxis. The destruction of the only inhabited moon in the Kronos system in 2293, a key energy production facility for the Klingon Empire, was not just a massive blow to Imperial ambitions, it was a watershed moment in the history of the Klingon people. The damage done to Klingon society as a result of the Praxis incident was so widespread that the Klingons had to make a choice. Would they continue their military posture and warrior ethos towards the Federation, risking the demise of their race? Or would they extend an olive branch and hope that their enemy would be sympathetic and maybe survive as a species? In order to understand the scope of this choice, to understand what was at stake, you have to know how much of an enemy the Federation had become and how reliant Klingons were on their warrior philosophy. And to do that, we'll need to go back to when the Klingons first started to leave their solar system, back to the point when humans and Klingons first met. Klingons began to leave Kronos using warp technology during Earth's 20th century. They expanded into surrounding star systems in much the same way that the Empire had previously grown on Kronos. During this transitional time, the Imperial system was, for some unknown reason, changed. The position of Emperor ended and was replaced with that of Chancellor. However these changes occurred, the growth of Klingon territory continued unabated. Klingons flung themselves into the galaxy in search of conquest and glory. One of the early chancellors, a Chancellor Makwa, famously sent an invasion fleet of warships to conquer the Breen. That fleet was never heard from again. Amid continued imperial expansion in the 22nd century, Klingons began to meet aliens that would have profound effects on Klingon society going forward. One species, the humans, would become particularly consequential. Klingons first met humans during a vulnerable time. Mid-century infighting between Klingon factions, which nearly became a civil war, served as the backdrop to Klingon-human first contact. That infighting was actually the result of outside meddling by the SULIBAN CABAL, an interstellar terrorist organization who were participants in the temporal Cold War. Humans helped Klingons avert the potential conflict when they returned a rescued Klingon to Kronos, a Klingon who had proof of SULIBAN interference. Despite their help, the Klingons gave the humans an icy reception, perhaps a memory of the lessons Klingons learned from the Herc invasion of the 14th century. Only a short time after this first contact, Klingons and humans nearly went to war with each other over a brush with genetically modified humans called AUGMENT, holdovers from a 20th century Earth conflict. The AUGMENTs dragged the Klingons into what was essentially an internal human affair when they hijacked a Klingon bird of prey, prompting a threat of reprisal from Chancellor Marek. The immediate emergency was averted. However, fearing an invasion by genetically enhanced human soldiers, Klingons began to modify themselves using human augment research. The results were disastrous. Attempts at Klingon modification failed. Test subjects died in agonizing ways. Through chance, one test subject was carrying a strain of Lavodian flu, which spontaneously incorporated the augment genetic modifications as part of its transmission. The flu transformed from a run-of-the-mill sickness into a plague, which introduced long-term havoc to the Klingon genetic code. The DNA of infected Klingons was essentially blended with portions of human augment DNA. Notably for victims, the distinctive Klingon forehead ridges were severely reduced.
Millions of my people will have to live with this disfigurement. It'll be passed on to our children. Life won't be easy for us.
Before the augment crisis, humans had been on the periphery of the Klingon cultural universe, just another species out in the galaxy. After the crisis, humans found themselves at the top of a very short list of aliens worthy of Klingon wrath. Not since the Herc had a single alien species affected Klingons so profoundly. As a result, Klingon-human relations, such as they were dripping with tension.
It's not how we do things in Starfleet.
Which is why the Klingon Empire will defeat you.
This tension carried over into the 23rd century, a period of rapid expansion for both the Klingons and the Federation, the new interstellar political state that included humans.
We have legitimate grievances against the Klingons. They've invaded our territory, killed our citizens. They're openly aggressive. They've boasted that they'll take over half the galaxy.
And why not? We're the stronger.
Skirmishes and minor confrontations sprang up over territorial claims in places like the Arcanus sector, Sherman's planet, and Organia. War was inevitably and officially declared in 2267, 113 years after the Augment crisis. Surprisingly, that war came to an abrupt end as a result of third-party interference from a powerful non-corporeal race of beings called the Organians. The result of that interference was the Treaty of Organia, which temporarily cooled tensions between the two emergent powers and created a neutral zone between them. In the wake of this new peace, the Federation, the Klingons, and the Romulan Star Empire, another large interstellar state, agreed to an experiment in the creation of a jointly managed colony on Nimbus 3, intended to be a symbol of galactic peace. While the Nimbus 3 experiment eventually failed, meetings between the three governments continued there for the next 20 years. However, despite the Treaty of Organia, skepticism, distrust, and minor confrontations would continue to be the norm between humans and Klingons.
Oh, eventually you will have peace, but only after millions of people have died. It is true that in the future, you and the Klingons will become fast friends. You will work together.
Never.
Meanwhile, relations between the Klingons and the Romulans initially resulted in a technology exchange, but went downhill severely from there. In 2271, all hopes of peace between Klingons and the Romulan Empire were destroyed in the Battle of GALACTIC in an area known to humans as the Briar Patch. The Klingons stayed true to their warrior spirit. Their bold, militaristic nature kept tensions high, not just with the humans, but with the Romulans as well. If it hadn't been for the Organian interference, the Klingons and the Federation might have fought against each other for years in a devastating war. Instead, the Treaty of Organia, imposed on the concerned parties by powerful outsiders, pushed the Klingons to adopt a tactic of coexistence that they had possibly not considered before. Peace for the sake of peace as a means of existence was as alien to Klingon life as the humans were. Even though the Klingons found themselves on this road progressing toward a non-violent relationship with humanity, traveling that road would not be easy. In the 2280s, Klingons discovered that the Federation had been working on what they felt was a superweapon, Project Genesis, an attempt to make uninhabitable worlds fit for habitation. Perhaps not originally imagined as part of the project, the weaponization of Genesis could work by vaporizing any previous organic matter on a planetary body and replacing it with a new life-creating matrix. The Klingons were upset that the Federation had been secretly working on technology with the capacity for vast destruction. As a result of the controversy of Project Genesis, post-Organian relations between the two powers were at their lowest.
Mystically called the Genesis Planet, a secret base from which to launch the annihilation of the Klingon people.
Despite this setback, attempts at peace were still made. Most famous among these were the 2289 Corvat negotiation, a series of meetings led by Federation mediator Curzon Dax and several highly respected Klingon ambassadors. Then, in 2293, Kronos would suffer its greatest catastrophe since the 14th century Herc invasion. The Klingon moon Praxis exploded, and Kronos found itself in a vulnerable, assailable position. Despite the Treaty of Organia and the Corvat negotiations, the Klingon relationship with humanity was still rife with tension. Praxis forced the Klingons to make a choice: continue with their distrust of the Federation, possibly resulting in the demise of their civilization, or make the spirit of the Treaty of Organia more permanent and end hostilities with humanity. Going against their general distrust of aliens, Klingons chose to make peace with the humans. The result was the Khitomer Conference, a push for a full peace treaty with the Federation and a demilitarization of the neutral zone. Despite efforts by some Klingons, Federation citizens, and even some Romulans, and indeed despite the very assassination of Chancellor Gorkon himself,
don't let it end this way.
The conference was a success. The Khitomer Accords were the result, a more permanent peace agreement that replaced the tenuous imposition of the Treaty of Organia. The Accords were the strongest proof yet that Klingons had the capacity to be adaptable on the galactic stage. Although Khitomer was a triumph, there was still some uncertainty in the air. Klingons and humans still didn't completely trust one another. In the end, however, it was the Romulans who would remove all doubt that the Federation and the Klingon Empire could live in peace with each other. Romulan-Klingon relations had continued to break down since the 2270s, as further evidenced by Romulan meddling in the Khitomer Conference. And despite an official agreement to be peaceable, hostility between Klingons and Romulans increasingly led to skirmishes and violence. In 2344, during a Romulan attack on a Klingon outpost on Narinda 3, a Federation starship came in to assist. The crew of that starship, the USS Enterprise NCC-1701C, sacrificed themselves in defense of the outpost. It was a poignant moment for the Klingons, who felt that self-sacrifice was an act of high honor. During another Romulan attack on the Klingon colony on planet Khitomer, which resulted in 4,000 deaths, the Federation starship Intrepid was the first to assist. These Federation acts of valor helped to change Klingon minds and reinforce the spirit of the Khitomer Accords. It appeared that what the Klingons and the Federation needed in order to maintain peace with each other was a common foe, the Romulans. Klingons and Romulans continued to spar with each other via sporadic skirmishes and covert infiltration. In one attack in 2350, Klingons managed to kill members of the Romulan Praetor's own family. The growing Romulan threat drove the Federation and the Klingons further into their burgeoning alliance. With the help of early negotiations with Riva of Romatis III and with principal negotiations by Sarek and Spock of Vulcan, the Klingon Empire and the United Federation of Planets advanced the Khitomer Accords with the Treaty of Alliance in 2353. This new treaty allowed each interstellar state to request the aid of the other in battle, and for citizens of one state to travel freely through the other. This alliance of friendship would become the foundation for peace in the Alpha Quadrant of the galaxy during the 24th century. For the first time since they met, a kind of friendship existed between the Klingons and the Federation. However, the Klingon-Federation alliance would soon turn into something not just convenient for peace, but necessary for survival. In the latter half of the 24th century, a series of challenges would emerge that neither the Klingons nor the Federation could survive on their own. Kimpek, the longest-serving Klingon chancellor in history, was poisoned in 2367. Two rival factions, led by the Duras family and by a political outsider named Gowron, competed for Kimpek's position, a succession mediated for the first time by an alien.
After I die, you will act in my name to arbitrate the struggle for power. I will.
Gowron would become the next chancellor, but the Duras family continued to push for control of the empire, and in 2368, Klingon society succumbed to a bloody, violent civil war over the matter. The tide of the war turned against the Duras family after it was revealed they received secret help from Romulan collaborators, Romulans whose ultimate aim was to break the Federation-Klingon alliance. With Federation assistance, the war was ended and the Duras family retreated. As a reaction to the turmoil surrounding the state of the Empire, the clerics of Boreth, the most sacred place in the Klingon realm, managed to make a clone of KAHLESS the Unforgettable from original DNA in the hopes of using KAHLESS to bring stability to Klingon society.
I have returned.
Criticism of this action was immediate, most notably from Chancellor Gowron himself. Despite the method of return, a compromise was reached and KAHLESS was made a figurehead emperor of the Empire, a symbolic position only. The events of the 24th century had been dramatic and consequential for the Klingon Empire. Civil war, a crisis of succession, a permanent alliance with the Federation, continued intrusions by the Romulans. However, greater trials were waiting still. In the 2370s, a series of conflicts would threaten to undermine the political stability of the Alpha Quadrant and threaten the Klingon relationship with the Federation in particular. The Dominion, a galactic power situated in the Gamma Quadrant of the galaxy, began pre-conquest work to destabilize Alpha Quadrant powers. Dominion changelings, shapeshifters, infiltrated Klingon government and coerced the Empire to start a war with the Cardassian Union. The Klingon invasion of Cardassia began in 2372, amid feudal protests by several prominent Klingons, including the Emperor clone KAHLESS. When the Federation officially protested the invasion of Cardassia, Chancellor Gowron declared the Khitomer Accords and the resulting Treaty of Alliance broken.
The Klingons have withdrawn from the Khitomer Accords. The peace treaty between the Federation and the Klingon Empire has ended.
All of the work toward peace over the last century with the Federation had been undone by the Dominion. The changeling interference continued to undermine the Klingon-Federation relationship. The Empire next made demands that the Federation withdraw from several key territories along their border, including the Arcanus sector. This led to the Federation-Klingon War of 2372 and 73, a brutal, dispiriting conflict that continued alongside the Empire's invasion of Cardassia. This was the first time that the Klingons and the Federation fought against each other since their brief war around Organia over a century prior. A ceasefire was put into place only when evidence of Dominion meddling was uncovered. Despite skirmishes like the Battle of AJILON Prime, the ceasefire with the Federation would hold. Meanwhile, a military coup d'etat on Cardassia re-established military control and formally announced a Cardassian alliance with the Dominion. thus ending the Klingon invasion.
The Dominion recognizes us for what we are, the true leaders of the Alpha Quadrant.
Once the level of Dominion infiltration within the Klingon Empire was made obvious, the Khitomer Accords and the Treaty of Alliance with the Federation were quickly re-established. The Dominion War, one of the greatest conflicts the galaxy has witnessed, broke out in late 2373. For 2 long years, the Klingons and the Federation, joined eventually and reluctantly by the Romulan Star Empire, would fight side by side defending their collective territory from Dominion forces. The scope of the war was epic. Thousands of ships were lost, billions of lives extinguished and affected, including 800 million Cardassians by war's end. The Klingons sacrificed much in the war effort, including their own Chancellor Gowron, whose authority was challenged in regards to the war at the height of the conflict. The Dominion War officially ended in 2375, with the Alpha Quadrant powers victorious. That victory would not have been possible without the union between the Federation and the Empire. As Klingons greatly respect the efforts of comrades in battle, the Treaty of Alliance may be even more permanent after the events that led up to the Dominion War. This hard-won respect may also conceivably be extended to the Romulans, who, despite their reluctance to join the war, were a key ally in the fighting. Perhaps Klingon cooperation with the Romulans in the Dominion War may open up an avenue for peace with the Romulan Star Empire. That avenue may be even more traversable after the tragic destruction of the Romulan capital planet in 2387, the Romulans' own Praxis moment. Then again, Klingons are restless. Their warrior philosophy has been at the root of many conflicts in their history. Whenever peace was achieved, it was usually because the Klingons had no other choice. The Praxis tragedy, the animosity with the Romulans, and then the Dominion War forced the Klingons to consider peace with the Federation time and again. Perhaps the greatest challenge for the Klingons will be when the option for peace is more desirable than that of a warrior posture without the threat of a larger conflict or crisis. The Romulan situation at the close of the 24th century represents a new chance for the people of KLS to prove their further adaptability on the galactic stage. Hello, thank you for watching this long and bloody tale. I suppose if you've made it this far, then you deserve some life points as compensation. This whole project would not have been possible without the fantastic resources that are Memory Alpha, the Analog Star Trek Encyclopedia, and the Daystrom Institute subreddit over at reddit.com. These resources were invaluable for creating a history of the Klingon people. If you like this sort of thing, then hit the subscribe button, and consider supporting the channel over on Patreon. Patreon really is the best way to guarantee future Trexpertise. Also, check out my latest video, Building an Internet Truth Kit. It might just be useful. See you soon.